I woke up to chainsaws, not construction in the distance. These were right outside my bedroom window, chewing through the oak trees my late wife had loved. 4 men in hard hats, and 1 woman in a white Escalade. Constance Pettin, my HOA president, smiling like she'd just won something. Those trees weren't just part of my yard. They were part of my life. One had Sarah's initials carved in it, another was where I'd proposed, and in 27 minutes, they were gone. Here's what Constance didn't know. She'd just committed multiple felonies in front of witnesses, and I had the evidence to prove it. See, I'd been documenting every bogus fine, every intimidation tactic, every violation notice she'd thrown at me for 18 months. And the deeper I dug, the worse it got. Expired HOA corporate status, hundreds of thousands in stolen dues, and a lakefront mansion built on land she didn't even own. This wasn't just harassment, it was a full-blown property theft ring disguised as an HOA. What started as a fight over my trees turned into the biggest HOA fraud case in Ohio history, $1.4 million in damages. The FBI at our HOA meeting, and a community reclaiming everything she'd stolen. Stick around, because I'm going to tell you how I went from being bullied in my own home to watching the same woman who tried to ruin me walk out of our community center in handcuffs. How we took back our neighborhood. I woke to the sound of chainsaws. Not the distant hum of construction, but the teeth and metal, bone-deep growl of machinery right outside my bedroom window. The kind of sound that makes your stomach drop before your brain's even caught up. Still in my pajama bottoms, I stumbled onto the porch. 4 men in hard hats were tearing into the oak trees that had shaded my home for 40 years. The same trees my late wife, Sarah, had loved more than most people love their pets. She used to say they were living proof that beauty could survive storms. Standing on the curb, directing the crew from the plush leather seat of a white Escalade, was Constance Pettin, my HOA president, my realtor when I bought the place, and apparently my executioner. She was smiling. What she didn't know was that those trees weren't just part of my property. They were part of me. Sarah's initials were carved into one. Another was the spot where I'd asked her to marry me, and where she'd told me, years later, about the cancer we couldn't beat. By the time the first branch hit the ground, I knew this wasn't just about trees, it was about power, and Constance had just picked the wrong man to test it on. 3 years earlier, when I bought my retirement home in Millbrook Estates, I thought I'd found paradise. 1.2 acres on a corner lot in Ohio, 6 massive white oaks older than me, and a perfect view of the lake. Constance, the realtor, had been all smiles back then. We barely have any rules here, she'd assured me, as if HOA presidents came with halos and baking contests. But the first HOA meeting told me otherwise. She ran it like a hostile corporate takeover. PowerPoint slides about property value optimization flashing behind her like a campaign slogan. She shut down a Vietnam vet's request for a memorial garden for his son with a gavel bang and a cold. Not in keeping with our vision. It was then I caught her looking through the community center window, not at me, but at my trees. And her eyes weren't admiring. They were calculating. 6 weeks later, she was at my door in tennis whites that probably cost more than my electric bill. Clipboard in hand. "Garrett, honey, we need to talk about your trees," she said, her perfume so heavy I could taste it. Turns out, community standards meant my oaks were blocking the lake view of 3 $800,000 homes on the far shore. The fact that they'd been there for decades didn't matter. The fact that she'd sold me the house with the trees still standing didn't matter. I learned my first piece of constant speech that day, When she said, "We need a solution that works for everyone," she meant you lose. What I didn't know then, as her heels clicked down my porch steps, was just how far she'd go to get her way, or how much it would cost her in the end. From that day on, it was never just about the trees. It started with friendly comments during her evening power walks, always stopping at my property line. Always the same syrupy tone hiding a hard edge. "Grass is looking a little long, Garrett. Mailbox could be straighter. That welcome mat isn't quite the right shade, is it?" I ignored her until the first violation notice arrived. Then the second, then the fifth. Each one carried a $50 daily fine. Grass height, mailbox positioning, unauthorized earth tone, welcome mat. I half expected the next one to cite me for breathing the wrong air. Appealing meant sitting in front of her hand-picked board of retirees, most too nervous to meet my eyes as they voted against me. The message was clear: comply or pay. But here's what Constance didn't know. Electrical engineers are professional problem solvers, and we keep receipts. Every conversation, every letter, every fine. I documented it all. While she was busy trying to bully me into compliance, I was spending late nights under my threatened oaks, laptop on my knees, reading property law like it was a crime novel. That's how I found her first crack. One of her experts, a so-called arborist who claimed my trees were dangerous, wasn't even certified. License suspended for falsifying safety reports. His emergency assessment was legally worthless. And the deeper I dug, the more rot I found. The HOA's corporate status expired 18 months earlier. That meant no legal authority to collect dues, impose fines, or even function as an HOA, but she'd kept going like nothing happened. The HOA bank account, not in the HOA's name at all. It was Piton Properties, LLC. Every check homeowners had written for 2 years had gone straight into her business account. Over $250,000 siphoned directly into her pocket. The more I learned, the more I realized this wasn't just about me. The Williams family on Elm Street. She forced them to cut down a healthy maple tree because it blocked a view. They moved rather than keep fighting. This was a pattern, a scam. And if my gut was right, she'd been running it for years. I didn't know it yet, but the battle we were fighting was about to explode into a war. And the opening shot, the one that would bring her entire empire crashing down, was going to come from the whine of a chainsaw. It was a Friday afternoon when Constance made her move. The HOA meeting 2 nights earlier had been a disaster for her. I'd confronted her about the expired corporate status and the illegal bank account in front of half the neighborhood. She'd kept that politician's smile plastered on, but I saw it. The flicker of fear. Fear makes predators dangerous. Saturday morning, she knocked on my door holding a thick manila folder and smelling like she'd bathed in perfume. "The Millbrook Estates Emergency Safety Committee has reviewed your trees," she purred. "They're in imminent danger. Removal starts tomorrow." Tomorrow, I told her she had no legal authority. She just smiled. That night, she must have been watching my social media. I'd posted about driving to Cleveland for my daughter Emma's college graduation. That was her opening. What she didn't know was that I wasn't going anywhere. At 5 a.m., I sat at my bedroom window with a camera in my lap and coffee I didn't bother to drink. At 6:47, they came. 2 pickups, a wood chipper, and a sheriff's cruiser. The chainsaws roared before I could even get outside. "Stop!" I shouted. "These are my trees, on my property." The crew foreman, weathered face, tobacco-stained teeth, handed me a work order signed by Constance Petton, Emergency Safety Coordinator, Millbrook Estates. It looked official, but I recognized the formatting. I'd seen it in the expired corporate files. It was nothing more than fancy stationery. The deputy shifted uncomfortably when I told him she had no legal standing. Inspector Rodriguez approved it, he said. Except I'd spoken to Rodriguez 2 weeks ago. He'd told me, in plain English, my trees were healthy specimens. Someone was lying, and then the first trunk cracked. The sound, 40 years of growth splitting apart, punched through my chest like a sledgehammer. One by one, my oaks came down, including the one where Sarah and I had carved our initials, the one where I'd proposed, the one where she'd told me she was sick. Every cut felt like they were carving pieces out of me. But Constance's greed made her sloppy. In their rush to finish before I could get a court order, they cut down trees 15 feet inside my confirmed property line. Those weren't just oaks, they were evidence. By 8:30 a.m., my yard looked like a war zone. Stumps where living giants had stood, sawdust drifting like snow. And in the middle of it all, I realized something crystal clear. She hadn't just committed fraud. She'd committed multiple felonies in front of witnesses. She thought she'd just improved her Lakeview. What she'd really done was hand me the ammunition to destroy her. By the time the last truck pulled away, I wasn't grieving. I was planning. My first call was to Marcus Bennett, a property rights attorney with the kind of smile lawyers get when they smell a slam-dunk case. Within 48 hours, he was in my dining room with 2 associates, a forensic accountant, and enough legal pads to wallpaper the house. "Garrett," he said, flipping through my photos of the stumps, "this isn't just property damage. This is a RICO case. Organized fraud. We're talking state, federal, and environmental law violations." Lisa Rodriguez, the accountant, leaned forward. She's siphoned $347,000 in HOA funds into her own business accounts, landscaping contracts to her companies, repairs that never happened. She even billed $23,000 in emergency legal fees to her divorce attorney. Then came Janet Morrison, environmental lawyer. 6 mature white oaks, 40 years old. And it wasn't just me. Word spread like wildfire. Henderson found $8,000 in bogus community center repairs that were never completed. Johnson discovered she'd been forced to remove a shed, only for Constance to install the exact same model at her own home with HOA funds. By Thursday, 7 families had joined the cause. Each story followed the same pattern. Manufactured violations, escalating fines, and threats of liens until people either caved or sold, often to buyers Constance herself brought in. Friday night, the phone rang. Carol Martinez, wife of the sheriff's deputy who'd stood in my yard that morning. She paid my husband $500 cash to supervise without asking too many questions, she said. He thought it was legitimate overtime until he found out there was no real emergency order. That gave us bribery of a public official. Another felony. Marcus laid out the plan like a military operation. File criminal complaints with county prosecutors and the state. Attorney General. Launch civil suits in state and federal court. Hit her professional licenses so she couldn't run her real estate scam again. Freeze her assets before she could sell off anything. And the final piece, reclaiming her lakefront mansion. We had proof it was built on land designated as community green space. Ohio law allowed the HOA to reclaim common property with a majority vote. Marcus smiled like a man picturing the headline. She cut down your trees to improve her view. We're going to take away the lake. The Sunday afternoon emergency HOA meeting was supposed to be Constance's last play. Word had gotten around that she planned to dissolve the HOA on the spot, erase the legal entity that owned the records of her crimes. No HOA meant no custodian for the stolen lakefront property. No custodian meant we'd have to fight for years to reclaim it by 1:30. The community center parking lot was overflowing, neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder, reporters setting up cameras. And in the back row, FBI agent Sarah Bennett, notebook open, badge flashing under the lights. Constance walked in wearing a black business suit like she was heading to her own funeral. Her husband trailed behind, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. She banged the gavel, voice trembling but still trying for authority. Given recent events, I am calling for an immediate vote to dissolve Millbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I stood up before she could finish. Before we vote, everyone here deserves to know what they're voting to dissolve. Her eyes went cold. Mr. Blackwood, you're out of order. I'm perfectly in order. And as a homeowner in good standing, I have the right to speak. I opened my folder and let my voice carry. Our HOA president has embezzled $347,000 in community funds, bribed a government official. The room exploded. People shouting, chairs scraping, phones recording. Agent Bennett's pen stopped moving. She was watching Constance now, really watching. Constance tried to rally. That's slander. I've devoted years of my life to protecting this community. I pointed at her. Explain why your house sits on land legally designated as community green space. And that was it. Her mask slipped. Her voice rose, sharp and furious. You people don't understand what I've done for this neighborhood. If that meant creative financing and strategic property management, so be it. The FBI agent stood. Mrs. Petton, anything you say can and will be used against you in federal court. In the stunned silence that followed, the cuffs clicked shut. Cameras flashed as they led her out. 6 years of intimidation and fraud ended with her being driven away in the back of a government SUV. 6 months later, a federal judge awarded me $1.4 million, the largest HOA fraud judgment in Ohio history. Constance pled guilty to 14 federal charges, forfeited the mansion, and was barred from ever holding a real estate license again. Where her house once stood now rises the Sarah Blackwood Memorial Community Center, named for my wife, who believed beautiful things grow stronger after storms. The stolen land is back in the community's hands. We've planted 40 new trees, one for every family in Millbrook Estates, with Sarah's memorial oak standing at the center. We built more than a case. We built a neighborhood worth fighting for.